PlayStation exclusives have slowly been making their way over to Steam, delighting many PC players and giving us much more options of things to play on our favourite handheld. But given the power of the PS5, it's always a bit of a question mark just how well these games will run on the Steam Deck. Helldivers 2 was playable, although it did take some hits when it came to graphics and performance. But today we're talking about Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Should you play this game on Steam Deck?
Yes.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. So Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart for me is probably one of the best looking games on PS5 at the moment. It could have been a Pixar movie really for how good the character models and the animations look. And I played this game originally when it came out on PS5, I loved it, I played it all the way through and completed it, so how does it compare on Steam Deck? The first thing I want to talk about when playing this game on Steam Deck, I don't think I normally would have included a section on in the video, but due to the recent controversy with Helldivers 2, I thought it was worth putting in this video. You don't need a Sony or a PlayStation account to play Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on Steam or on Steam Deck. There's no launcher, there's nowhere to sign in or anything like that. The game is fully single player, so I wouldn't really have expected there to be, but just in case anyone out there is wondering about that, you know, due to what Sony was doing recently, I'd like to put some minds at ease. You don't need any kind of account. The game just launches straight from Steam and straight into gameplay. Now we've got that out of the way though, let's talk about the graphics. Now by default the graphics are set to the medium preset and that's with FSR on. And if you just want to play the game, you don't want to worry about messing around with graphics settings, then you can play it this way. But what I will say is that with that FSR setting on with medium graphics settings, you're going to have quite a range of FPS depending on sort of what's happening in the game. The combination of FSR and the resolution scaling really just means that you could go from anything as high as sort of 50 to 60 frames per second all the way down to the sort of mid 20s, and it's not so noticeable on a small screen, but it definitely is there enough that I did notice, and it can be a little bit jarring if it jumps from sort of quite low to quite high in a short space of time. For this reason I actually decided to try turning FSR off. Now I left resolution scaling on, but with FSR off I actually think this is a bit of a better way to play. It does sort of lower the frame rate ceiling quite a bit, so you're not going to get those 50s to 60s frame rates anymore. Instead it's more balanced out and even, so you're usually between sort of high 20s and low 40s instead, and I just find this to be a little bit better. With FSR there were definitely some noticeable points where the resolution scaling really kicked in, everything got quite blurry, and if you turn FSR off this does still happen, but it doesn't happen quite as often. Turning FSR off also seems to fix some weird artifacts in the weapon shop menu, so you can see here on the screen, you know, with FSR on there's sort of this sort of weird ghosting to some of the menus, and with FSR off it seems to mostly go away, so that's a bit nicer. Just one thing to bear in mind is that these frame rates I'm giving you are with an OLED Steam Deck. Yes, I finally got one, I've been playing around with it, trying it out for the last couple of weeks. I will do a video eventually, but yeah, just to let you know, this is with an OLED Steam Deck now. So if you've got an LCD Steam Deck, you might get a few less frames, but I don't think it'll be too drastic a difference. So I really like playing Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart without the FSR setting turned on. For me, having sort of that more consistent, smoother frame rate is much better than it sort of constantly bouncing up and down, and that resolution scaling gets toned down a little bit. It is still there, so sometimes you still notice some pixelation, but on the whole I don't mind sacrificing those few moments where you do get 50 to 60 frames for a sort of overall smoother experience. That's kind of how I prefer to play, and really I think that this is possibly the prettiest game that I've played on Steam Deck. Sometimes during cutscenes all of the resolution scaling falls away, the frame rate smooths out, and it just looks incredible. It really does look like you're watching a movie on your Steam Deck. This is the first Sony port that I've played. I did play Helldivers 2, but they were kind of made for PC and PlayStation at the same time, whereas this is a proper port. It came out on PlayStation first and then was moved over to PC, and I'm really impressed with, you know, just sort of how it looks and how well it runs. In fact, I'd be really interested to know, because for me this has got to be up there as one of the best looking games on Steam Deck. Are there any other games that you've been playing on Steam Deck that you think look better than this? Let me know down in the comments, because I'd love to check those out. Using these settings for graphics and with the FSR setting turned off, like I said, I tend to get about 2 hours 15 minutes of battery life, which I think is pretty good. Now again, I did just get the OLED, so if you've got an LCD Steam Deck you probably get a little bit less than that. The gameplay that you're seeing now on the screen is with that graphics preset changed from medium down to low with FSR still turned off, and I think this is another good option to play this game. The frame rate stabilizes a bit higher than when you're playing on medium, so I wouldn't say that you're sort of locked in at 40 at this point, but 40 frames are happening much more frequently than when you're playing on the medium settings, and the dynamic resolution doesn't seem to have to kick in as often, so while there is a bit less detail in the graphics, the picture stays sharper more often. Now the trade-off of course is the detail in the graphics, and I don't think this is too noticeable when you're sort of running around and fighting, because the action is sort of too quick for you to be paying attention to the different things happening on screen properly and really noticing that detail. So I don't think you really see it during those moments. However, I think it is noticeable when the action sort of slows down, and especially in cutscenes. I don't really know how well this is going to come across on YouTube when things are sort of compressed down for their videos, but during cutscenes especially, I think you do notice a difference in the detail. The two main characters, Ratchet and Rivet, as Lombaxes, they have a lot of hair, and I do think you notice the difference. Plus things like shadows too, I think it's quite easy to spot the difference in the quality of shadows when you change between the two graphic settings. Like I said, there's plenty of benefits with the frame rate, and the downsides do sort of melt away during combat. You don't notice them, so there's definitely an argument to be made for playing on either low or medium graphic settings. I think it's personal preference really. After a while I settled on the low graphic settings just because I prefer to play with a bit of a better frame rate, and you know, you're in combat a lot of the time anyway, so you don't always notice that loss of, you know, visual fidelity. Now, I said earlier that I was really impressed with the PC port of this game, and one of those extra features that I wasn't expecting but I think is really nice to have is that it has proper support for the Dualsense controller. Now, in order to capture footage for this video, I have been playing in docked mode sometimes. I've just been playing at native Steam Deck resolution, and that means that what you're seeing and the frame rates that you're seeing are representative of what you should see when playing handheld on the Steam Deck. That's how I do a lot of these videos. But because when I was playing docked, I was playing with a PlayStation 5 controller, it was really nice to get these extra DualSense features, things like the adaptive triggers. Ratchet & Clank makes good use, I think, of adaptive triggers, so if you do have a PlayStation 5 controller and you want to check it out, then that is an added bonus. One of the things that was talked about quite a lot during the original promotion of this game when it was coming out on PS5 was the speed of the PlayStation 5 SSD, and how that meant that in Rift Apart you could sort of jump through rifts at speed and they would be able to very quickly load these new dimensions. Now, I don't know the technical differences between the speed of the SSD in the PlayStation 5 and the Steam Deck, but I just want to say that it holds up pretty well. There's the occasional one when you're in some of these sort of action set pieces and you're going through multiple rifts at once, where every now and then you notice that the character is taking a little bit longer to sort of fall through that rift than you expect, but on the whole I think it keeps up pretty well. Sleep mode does work well in Rift Apart, but it's almost sort of unnecessary just because of how good the saving in this game is. If you ever quit out and then you load back in, it's very rare that you're pushed back very far at all, and a lot of the time you're actually just launched straight back into where it was that you left off. So while I still enjoy sleep mode, it's much less of a big deal if I have to actually quit out of this game. Also, there's just a small thing, but shutting down this game feels like it happens really quickly as well. Sometimes with the Steam Deck I find that quitting out of a game, it just sort of hangs for a while and then eventually gets back to the Steam menu, but that doesn't happen with this one. It's very, very quick to sort of quit back out. Finally, the fan does kick in a bit when playing. It's not the loudest that I've heard it, you know, there are definitely other games that make it spin up a lot more, you know, for example Cyberpunk, but it is sort of consistently there, so just to let you know in case that's something that is a big factor for you. So that is the technical side of the video. Now we come to the part where we talk about gameplay. Just how fun is Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart?
Ratchet & Clank! What a wonderful surprise! I didn't expect to see you here. Considering my goons were meant to annihilate you 8 minutes ago.
Now, I've liked the Ratchet & Clank series for quite a long time. All the way back on PS2, I was playing it with my brother. I did miss out on the PS3 entries just because that's one of the consoles that I never happened to own, but I've been really excited that it's been back on PS4 and then PS5. I really enjoyed playing this game on PS5, and then on the second playthrough that I'm doing on Steam Deck now, I've also been having a great time with it. Like the name suggests, this game revolves around a lot of shifting dimensions and tears between reality. Clank gifts Ratchet the Dimensionator, which is supposed to help him search for the Lombaxes who have been long lost in the dimensions, but chaos ensues when Dr. Nefarious shows up. The Dimensionator accidentally gets broken and all of these rifts start appearing all over the universe, and you have to go and figure out how to stop the universe from sort of tearing itself apart. Along the way you meet some new allies, and I really like the addition of Rivet and Kit. They've both got a lot of heart and I think that they fit in really well with sort of the main duo of characters. Combat in this game is a mix of melee and ranged, but really the big focus is on the guns. There are about 20 guns that you can unlock as you play through the game, and all of them have both level ups and an upgrade system using the Raritanium currency, where you can sort of pick the upgrades from the vendor. There really is a big difference in these guns. You do have a couple of normal ones, like a normal blaster and grenades, but then it goes all the way up to the wackiest ones. Things like a turret that sprays out foliage and turns your enemies into this sort of shrubbery, and a ricochet gun where you sort of fire out a projectile and then it sort of bounces back and forth at the enemy and you hit them more than once with it. I think my favorite though is the Negatron Collider. It just shoots out this huge beam, and the more you level it up, it can basically just take out whole waves of enemies at a time as it gets to its most powerful. Generally, gameplay is just really fast and fluid. Not too far into the game you unlock these jet boots that allow you to sort of whiz around the map, and they're a lot of fun. They are just an enjoyable way to sort of get around and explore. I think combat is really active and engaging, and you're sort of always on the move. Just in general in Ratchet & Clank, nothing in this game feels too drawn out. There's 9 planets that you visit in this game, and then none of them really look too similar, and each one sort of has a main quest line that you go through, but it doesn't take too long. You're never stuck on one planet for too long of a time. But on the other hand, if you want to stick around on a planet that you like, there are usually additional side quests that you can do. If you're an achievement hunter or something like that, then there's always extra bits for you to do on a planet. But at the same time, if you don't want to stick around, you don't have to, because the main quest line never feels like it's too drawn out on one planet. Barring a few moments in the main story where you are sort of locked to one place, once you have unlocked a planet, you can jump back and forth between them whenever you want, and that freedom is great. And there's also an arena mode on one of the planets, which allows you to progress through more and more tougher challenges, and it's just a really fun addition as well. There are a couple of mini game modes. There's one where you have to clear out some viruses, and there's also a puzzle mode that you play as Clank, where it's sort of a logic puzzle and you have to figure out exactly how to get all the different Clanks moving in the way that you want them to. And while I don't mind puzzles, they're not my favorite thing, and I did play through these puzzles once before, but it's really good to have the option you can skip these if you want, and the game will just sort of give you a summary of what the characters talked about while the puzzle was happening. That's a nice inclusion. If you like puzzles, they're there to play. If you don't really like puzzles, then you can skip through that. In case you haven't figured it out yet from the footage, the game does not take itself too seriously at all. It's very wacky and silly, and I think it's very funny. Dr. Nefarious is just a really over-the-top villain, and alongside him there's just plenty of funny jokes and silly characters.
Me? It's me! It worked! It worked! I am the winner!
There are a lot of serious games out there these days, and so I do think that every now and then it's nice to just pick up one that's nice and easy to digest, and it's just really fun to actually play through. And of course the game sort of has that signature trademarked Sony polish. Everything is very well put together, all the way down to just the animation of collecting the nuts and bolts, which are your currency. They sort of magnetize and fly into you, and it's a really satisfying animation for collecting that currency. Overall then, I think Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is a really fun game. It's not super long or meaty, it's definitely not one of those games where you have to sort of grind out for 10 hours before the game starts to get fun and interesting. There's a lot of fun and entertainment and enjoyment there right from the very start. I'm really impressed with the PC port and how it runs on Steam Deck, and I think this game looks absolutely incredible. Now sure, I might just still be being wowed by it being the first game that I've played on my OLED, but I think those graphics are going to look amazing no matter which Steam Deck model it is that you've got. I did pick it up on sale just because I've already played it through once, but even on this second time going around, I'm having a great time playing through the whole thing again. If you're not too sure about paying the whole £50 for it, then checking SteamDB, it does seem to go on sale pretty frequently. But either way, whether you pay full price or half price, I think it's a really fun game, and I don't really think anybody will regret picking this one up. Well, there we have it. I hope this answers the question of should you play Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on Steam Deck, but I would love to know what you think. Will you pick this one up now, or maybe you're already enjoying it? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Say